Drag me down my life. You stood by me when no one else was ever behind me. All these lights, they can't blind me. With your love, nobody can drag me down.
So tonight we've actually got PJ, who's flown all the way from Lennox Hills. Is that correct, PJ? Lennox Heads, sorry. Lennox Heads, which is about an hour south of the Gold Coast. PJ's actually had about a bit over 20 years worth of experience in the teaching field. He's been a head of the English department. He's had about 5 or more years of welfare experience, being head of welfare. He's actually also an English teacher. Last year, his English students, about 15 out of 21 or 22 English students scored a band 6 from his advanced English class. His extension 1 English class, I believe, their lowest mark was about 48 out of 50. So he knows what he's talking about. When it comes to balance, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to teaching, he's your man. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce PJ up to the stage.
Good evening. As Wissam said, I've had 20 years experience. During that time, I've seen a lot of things. I've physically gone and dragged kids to school because I knew that they had to be there if they were going to get through. I've seen kids do ridiculous things in cars, at parties, at school. I've seen a lot of things in 20 odd years. And I've come to a few realisations as well over the years. So tonight, I want to preface what I'm going to say tonight with this though. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not going to put anybody on a couch. Lay down, tell me your problems. We don't do that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a counsellor. I've done all those roles in 20 years, admittedly. I've done all those roles. What I'm going to tell you tonight is what I've seen as a teacher. What I've seen as being in a classroom with 26, 27, 28 kids year after year, going through what we always get told is the hardest exams of your life. One of my favourite students of all time is a girl called Nikki. Nikki's at Melbourne University this year. Nikki's one of my favourite students of all time because she had no right to get above 94 in the HSC last year. She had no right. She was an absolute stress head. In year 9, year 10, I had to sit and have lunch with Nikki pretty much every day to make sure that she was eating. Last year, Nikki excelled, absolutely excelled. She set herself a target and she excelled. I spoke to Nikki this afternoon. She sent me an email. She said, "Hey, Mr. H, can you please edit for me this take-home exam that I'm doing for my arts law degree at Melbourne University?" No worries, Nick. Do anything for Nikki. I open up the email. It's a deconstruction of Beyonce's Or the Single Ladies. I read it. Art law degree at Melbourne University. So I rang Nick and I said, what? Are you serious? You want me to read this? Is this a joke? She goes, "No, this was our task." Said, "Last year, you spent 8 hours on a Saturday in the library at school deconstructing Hamlet. From the first act, the first scene, the first words to the last words. This year, you're deconstructing Beyonce's Or the Single Ladies." And in that essay, she still had techniques. That's why I love Nikki. Because what she learnt last year, she carried on. And what I've seen over 20 years is a lot. And I've come to probably 2 realisations about the HSC in particular. And I want to share these with you tonight. The first thing is that it's going to be tough. That works. It's going to be difficult. If you're invested in it, it's going to be a difficult year. There's no shirking that. There's no hiding that. because you're invested in it. It's going to be a difficult year for your parents. They're invested in it. What that means is you care about it. So it's going to be challenging. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the HSC being challenging. And the simple reason for that is this. You know what the exams are going to be on. They tell you. Well, I'll come to that later. They tell you, though, what you're going to be assessed on. Just remember that. The other thing, though, I've learned is this. The HSC is very, very doable. It doesn't set out to penalise people. And too often, we talk about the HSC being something that's about penalising. At the end of last term, I marked Extension 2. It was the first time I marked Extension 2 English this year. I've marked all the other sections over the years. And I was surprised again, and I'm surprised every time I do HSC marking, at just how positive the marking centres are. I always say to my kids year after year after year, you start, for an English essay, you start at 0. You don't start at 20 and lose marks. Hold on, think about this for a moment. This is powerful. You don't start at 20, and as a teacher, as a marker, we're looking to take marks away from you. You start at 0. You start blank. You start at 0. Whatever you put on that page, you earn marks for. The effort that you put in, you earn marks for. Therefore, it's very doable. It's a very, very doable process. You're not the first, or due respect, you're not the first, and you're not going to be the last people to do the HSC. And that perspective helps you to keep that balance in order. Think about this. When you start to think about the HSC as being something that's doable, as being something, it's challenging, and you're going to have difficult moments, but it's not there to penalise you. When you start thinking about that, all of a sudden, this thing, the HSC, it becomes a part of your life, a part of it. Not all of it. For this next 12 months, it becomes a part of it. When you understand that we're not after penalising you, then the faceless people, you know, let's call them the examiners, the Board of Studies. There's 3 bad words, the Board of Studies. Those people walking those hallways aren't walking those hallways going, how are you going to get them this time? Right? This is what you always say. People always say, the paper's hard. It's going to be tricky. How are we going to get them? They're walking the hallways, writing papers, writing exams, going this. How are we going to write a question that allows students to show us what they know? So it leads to this question. If it's doable, but it's going to be challenging, then what do I need to do? What is it that I need to know? Okay? You're going to be anxious. It's going to be challenging. But what you need to know is really, really simple. It's this. 1597, Sir Francis Bacon said these words. Knowledge is power. Now in 1597, Bacon wasn't talking about our sensationalised version, media version of power. He wasn't talking about material wealth, that the most powerful is the one who's able to accumulate the most. He was talking truly about what knowledge meant. Jefferson used it after that, through the America's history. When you know something, then you have the power to act on it. When you know something, you have the power to act on it. This photo's been doing the rounds a bit lately. It's a really interesting photo. It's a beach called Boulders Beach. I can hear the waves of Boulders Beach from my house. Beautiful little spot. And lately in the media, I'm sure you've all heard about it, there's this great brouhaha about great white sharks on the far north coast. And a couple of weeks ago, this photo was taken. These guys, obviously paddling away from what was a 3-metre great white shark. Afterwards, after this photo was taken, I was talking to people who were out there, a couple of kids from my school. I said, were you worried? Are you scared? One of the boys, this guy, I wasn't worried. I said, weren't you worried? I would have been, I've been doing these ones. Weren't you worried? And Blake was like, no, I wasn't worried. I said, why weren't you worried? He goes, well, that photo, what it doesn't show is that about 30 seconds, a minute before, that shark had actually swum right underneath everybody. And he said, we could have just reached down and touched it. That's how close it was. It swam through everybody, then it turned around and it came back. Everybody had scrambled and was standing, except for these guys, everybody else was scrambled and they were standing in knee-deep water. They were watching the shark. They knew where it was. So they weren't worried. They knew where it was. So you think about it. When are the times in our lives when we stress the most? When do we stress the most? When we don't know something. We're going to the doctor. We're waiting for tests, test results. We're worried, aren't we? Because we don't know. When we know something, we know the steps that we can take or we can possibly take to address whatever the concern is. Knowledge is power. Makes sense, doesn't it? And when you combine it with this, the HSC is not about penalising you. When we write exam papers, we don't write exam papers to try to trick you. We write exam papers that say, tell us what you know. Show us what you have done. When you combine what Bacon said, knowledge is power, with the understanding that as examiners, Board of Studies is asking for you, all of a sudden it becomes very doable. Now, people talk all the time. People offer all wonderful advice about the HSC. This is what Mike Baird said, Premier of the State. And I'm not a political person at all. I'm not bashing politicians by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not particularly interested. But I like what he said, but I have issues with what he says. Here's the truth of it. This was posted on Facebook a couple of days out before the exams or the morning of the exams started. Right? Our politicians using social media, fantastic. Here's the truth of it. Life isn't defined by your exams. It begins after they've finished. It's always important to give everything you do your very best shot, but make sure you keep some perspective. I like that. Make sure you keep some perspective. When you walk out of that final exam, you've got the world at your feet. And most of us oldies will tell you that your best days are yet to come. I'll tell you that. I'm an oldie. I can say that about myself now. A few years ago, I couldn't say that about myself. I was still struggling. Didn't quite understand. Your best days are yet to come. But the catch of it is this. Some of you aren't going to have the world at your feet. When you finish your exams, a lot of you in this room right now are going to have family responsibilities, community responsibilities, self-responsibilities, little brothers and sisters to look after while mum and dad go out. The world is not going to necessarily be at your feet. Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay? So there's some issues there. Your best days are yet to come. Absolutely. The adage is this: 2 months after you start university, it's like that old movie Fight Club. Have you heard that? First rule of Fight Club: don't talk about Fight Club. Apparently at university, as I get told year after year, 2 months in it's this: first rule of university, don't talk about the HSC. You're going to have responsibilities and very soon the HSC is going to be over. But there's so many studies done. This is from Torrens University. The Vice-Chancellor, Justin Bilby, he gives these ideas. And they're good ideas. They're good ideas. Know your learning style. Prepare your study materials. Work in short, focused sessions. Look after your mental health and well-being. And during the exam, read questions thoroughly. Thanks for that. I like this. To be healthy, hold on, because this is what most of these people say. To be healthy, don't be unhealthy. To do well in your HSC, which is a difficult year, which is a challenging year, which you care about your here. To do well in the HSC, don't stress about it. You're going to stress about it. Isn't that the worst thing? Don't worry about it. I am worried. Don't worry, but I am worried. So what do? Why can't these people come out and tell us what to do? I'm going to give you a few ideas. These are all people from my school over the last, how long have I been there now? 12 years, 10 years, sorry. All of these people have finished their HSC. They've all finished. They all did well. There is a 50 out of 50 extension 2 English student. There's people up there who didn't even do the exam. One of the boys there, who's now an English teacher and I work with him, didn't even sit his exams. Got so stressed. Couldn't do it. Got so sick. There's kids there 2 weeks out from the exam. One boy in particular, you can try and guess who he is. Absolute ratbag of a kid, year after year after year, caused so many problems. 2 weeks out from the exam, got an awesome apprenticeship in a mine up at Mount Isa. Left. 2 weeks out from the exams. Nah, I don't need to do it. Fantastic. They all had one thing in common though. All the kids up here, I would say, in one form or another, they were stressed. They felt the anxiety more so than other people in their year groups. Now here's the thing. Also on that page is somebody who is now competing on the WSL, the World Surf League. There is somebody on there, one of the girls there. I used to see this girl 3 days a week at the same time ride her bike as fast as she could past my house. You should be picking up on what I'm going to say next. There's other boys in there who played football, continued to play football. Dad kept saying, don't play football. You need to stop. You can't do training 2 nights a week, play a game on a Saturday, sometimes on a Sunday, plus study. And he kept saying, no, I need to. I need to. I know what I need. See, the thing about stress and anxiety, it's actually really simple, okay? You need to know where it comes from firstly. We'll talk about that. But then you need to know how to manage it. And there's no, for you guys, in the HSC year, there's no real secret to it. Perhaps the real key is this. You have to do something physical. Now, some of you are going to groan about that. Think, oh, I need to take up a sport. I don't mean that you need to take up a sport. You need to get oxygenated blood pumping through your veins. That's simple. Right? And there's a really clear reason for it. Because of this. See, when you exercise, and this is the catch of it, when you exercise, it affects your brain. So forget about stress for a moment and anxiety. Forget about just taking a break from study, right? And going, okay, I just need to have a break. Just forget about that for a moment. Think about this. Exercise actually makes your brain makes your brain grow. Muscles get bigger, so does your brain. If you exercise, your brain has a far better chance of actually growing because you provide an environment for the growth of brain cells by releasing all these hormones. Like teenagers need to release more hormones. However, you need to for the purposes of this. That was one thing all these kids had in common. They handled their stress. I'll come back to that. The other thing, though, they did was this. Each of those kids, and others, right? Think back to Nikki, 12 months on, not even 12 months on. She's still asking, hey, Mr. H, can you look at this? The other thing about stress and anxiety is this. Knowledge is power. When you know how to address it. But sometimes you need to know what you need to know. And guess what? You're not meant to know it yet. It's confusing, isn't it? To manage your stress and your anxiety, you've got to know stuff, but you haven't learnt that stuff yet. You're going to do Rossetti's poetry, some of you. You need to know Rossetti. I need to know Rossetti's poetry. Oh, okay. I need to know why weren't we told. I need to know all these formulas in maths, in chem, in physics. I still don't know my elements table, my periodic table. Oh my goodness, 12 times tables. I can't do it. There's stuff that you know already, but there's stuff that you don't know yet. Hence you ask. The Dux of our school last year, during his address, he made a comment that didn't go down very well by teachers in the room. He said this: everything you need to know is on a YouTube video for the HSC. Everyone sort of sat there and went and shuffled in their seat. I laughed, thought it was hilarious. Everything you need to know is on a YouTube video. It's not, he was exaggerating. You need to have good relationships with people, particularly your teachers. Any decent study of HSC results is going to tell you that the person that makes the biggest difference, first and foremost, is the classroom teacher. The person who makes the biggest difference next is actually your mum or your dad, believe it or not. You need to have healthy relationships with people around you, okay? Then you need to understand where your stress comes from. There's a great, University of New South Wales did a research, a little focus group, a little research focus group this year. Just let me find these figures. They said this, that in this research group, what happened was they found that these were the causes of stress. That in general, 54% of students felt that too much was expected of them, and hence they got stressed by that. The main causes of pressure that were identified in this focus group were the workload. 50% of people said workload. Then was the expectations. 26% of people in this focus group said that expectations was the biggest cause of stress. And then the importance of exams. I laugh about that, the importance of exams, because we always forget with the HSC that by the time you get to your final exam, 50% of your marks are done and dusted. I mean, we talk about it all the time as teachers, but we never stop to make our kids really understand it. This is where the whole thing about it's a marathon with a sprint at the end comes into play. There's no sprint at the end. It's a marathon. Consistency. The interesting thing about this, though, was that 44% of respondents identified themselves as causing themselves the most stress because of their expectations. They identified themselves as the greatest source of pressure, putting expectations on themselves. Why? Because they care about it. Because they're invested in it. For whatever reason. You think it's the pathway to university. If you have grander, loftier ambitions. Or simply for the sake that you've set yourself to do it and you want to do it the best that you can. 35% said family, 21% said school or teachers. And this, probably more applicable for this room. More gifted students, right, identified themselves more than others, and these gifted students also identified their peers as being a great source of pressure. So students with higher expectations of themselves and of a higher ability were more inclined to say that their peers caused them stress and anxiety. So now you know this information. Now you've got the knowledge. Now you have the knowledge. You know that you can cause yourself, you know that you can cause your friends and your peers a great deal of stress. Usually it's inadvertently. You don't mean to, it's just that you've got high expectations. But now you know, so act on it. Be more considerate. Take time out for yourself. Get those little excitable, what are those whatever they're called, neurons in your brain? Get them bumping around and jumping around and getting all buzzed by going for a walk. Get that plasticity happening. All right? There's scientists in the room that can easily correct me on that. Get those neurons working. And secondly, Foster good relationships with people. Not just with yourself. Not just with yourself, by being physical. When you feel yourself starting to get anxious, you feel yourself starting to get stressed. I know it. It's funny when someone talks about the boy of the jaw. That's what I do. I feel myself clenching, my jaw clenching. Go for a walk. Go for a run. Go to the gym if that's what you want to do. It doesn't have to be anything except a brisk walk. It may mean simply getting off the bus a stop earlier, or if mum and dad drop you at school saying, hey, just drop me here, I'm going to walk that last 100 metres. It can be that simple. The whole aim is just to get oxygenated blood pumping through your veins, because that then excites your brain cells, releases hormones, and trust me, all of a sudden you'll go, okay, I can do this. Walk in, find out what's wrong. Exercise. I like this cartoon. I just stumbled across this. I see you did well in school, but what real world skills do you have? I can take tests. Yes. That's my real world skills. I can take tests. But I like this diagram on the other side. Sleep, exercise, eat, study. Sleep, exercise, eat, study. It's a nice little mantra to follow. Sleep, exercise, eat, study. Makes sense, doesn't it? To be healthy, we can't be unhealthy. We need to exercise. We need to eat properly. I spent a couple of days at Auburn, the senior college, last term. And Diana took me out to lunch one day. And I come from a little town. And admittedly, there's some nice places around to go and eat. But we walked down the street and I was just like, oh, God, the smells. Fantastic. We ate at a little Turkish cafe. Oh, the food was awesome. And then I saw a bunch of kids, not from our farm, I'm not sure what school they were from, going into McDonald's. Now, I don't want to bag McDonald's. There's a place for McDonald's. But I couldn't help but think, they were obviously on their lunch break, for cheaper, you could eat healthier. Makes sense. It makes sense. You're not going to do it all the time, but you need to look after yourself. That includes diet, it includes exercise. That's what the balance is all about. So come back to this. What if you knew? One of the biggest things that causes us stress is that we don't know. We don't know. We don't know what those test results are going to be. We're not sure what's going to be on the exam. But what if you did know? What if you start this year saying, I know what I'm going to be marked on. I know what I'm going to be assessed on. You should all be sitting there at the moment going, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I could write my essays now. And boys in the room go, it doesn't matter if I break up with my girlfriend. I don't need her to write my essays. Girls, you know it's true. You sit there and you go, okay, what if I knew? What if I knew? Think about this. This was a HSC question from General Maths from a few years ago. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination. That's why I married one. And my wife sits there all the time. She sits there all the time, tutors kids around our kitchen table once a week, has done for any number of years. And I hear this all the time. You know what's going to be in the exam. The numbers will be different. The formulas will remain the same. That's the first thing I hear. And I hear this. Show you're working out. Show you're working out. Show how you know what you've just arrived at. Show you're working out. Could be a mark, could be two. All the time I hear it. And it's become a bit of a running joke in my classrooms for general maths. Because I say this. In general maths, you know what you're going to be assessed on. This is an exam question. Some of you have already worked it out. Undoubtedly. The numbers are different, the situation's different, but the formula's the same. Isn't it? Now here's the thing with general maths. They give you the formula sheet in the exam. You walk in, you get your exam booklet, they give you the formula sheet. So general maths becomes very doable. General maths isn't a subject that causes much stress because we know I'm going to have to use these formulas, right? You know what you know you need to know those formulas. But English is different. History is different. Art is different. Business studies is different. These subjects can and usually do cause more stress, especially English. Why? Because people walk into the exam and instead of thinking, I need to know my formulas, people walk into the exam and go, I've got all this stuff I need to know. No, they've told you, look at this. You've seen this. Most of you have seen this. Discovery. You're going to hate that word. Some of you probably, I already hate it. Discovery. But look at this. The Board of Studies has told you in your first English paper, which for most of you is going to be the first exam you do. The Board of Studies has already told you what that paper is going to be on. They're not telling you it's going to be on all of that. They're not telling you exactly which point it's going to be on, but they're telling you it's going to be on discovery and it's going to revolve around these points. So your job isn't to make stuff up. Now hold on. You need to know. Your job isn't to make stuff up. Your job is to gain this knowledge, to come to this understanding of what this means. See, now it becomes doable. Now you should be sitting there thinking, so why do I stress? If I know that we stress, and we're talking HSC, we're not talking about finance and marriage breakdowns and illness and that stuff that happens in life. We're talking about the HSC. We know that usually in the HSC we stress because we think we don't know something. But I'm here telling you, but you do know. So to really get the balance, you need to eat well, you need to exercise well, you need to study well. And don't just study well. Understand that what you have to do in the very, very vast majority of the subjects is this. Learn the stuff that they're telling me to learn. Because this is the stuff that I'm going to be assessed on. I hear this comment all the time from English students. Is my essay going to fit? Is my general essay that I've written and prepared, am I going to be able to write that again? And I say this. Well, is that essay about Hamlet? Yeah. What's it about with Hamlet? It's about how Hamlet searches for the truth. So that's your understanding of the text. Yep. What does it say in Module B? The prescription statement for Module B. It says this. Personally engage with the text. Come to a personal understanding. So, is that what you've done? Yes. Have you done the right thing? Yes. Is my essay therefore going to fit? Yep. You might have to tweak it. You might have to think on your feet a little bit on how you're going to use that information, but you are still going to use that information. You're not going to walk into your English exam on Rossetti's poetry, on Hamlet, on discovery, and all of a sudden they ask you something about belonging. They're not going to walk in and in that first paper, these words aren't going to be in it. It's going to be something totally different. You know what you are going to be assessed on. So what you do is take the steps to learn what you need to know. I think about it like this. I spent a lot of time talking about resilience, and I realised after I spent 4 or 5 years talking about it across different year groups in school, and it wasn't probably until my own kids got a little bit older and started going to school and having to deal with things that I really started to understand what the word resilience means. And it gets bandied around the media a lot. Counsellors use it. And again, people who haven't been in schools, right, they use this word. Professors telling us stuff about bullying and resilience and stress and anxiety. And it always irks me. People always say to me, why don't you not teach? Why don't you become a principal? Why don't you become an assistant principal? And I say, I miss the classroom. The reason why I miss the classroom is this, because in the classroom I learn so much. And I've seen this in my son's in kindergarten. I go into his classroom once a week. And I've seen it happen here, because in kinder you're always getting things wrong. You know, like you can't make that O quite properly. You haven't got the dexterity. 1 + 1 still equals 3, but it's 3, Dad. I mean, Noah was saying to me the other day, but no, it's what? No, buddy. And I've started to understand more what resilience means. And what I've come to understand is this. It means to bounce back. To bounce back. And this is a really important thing in schools. Resilience is about bouncing back. Understanding yourself. Understanding how stress, how anxiety can affect you. And then bouncing back from it. That's what's important. It's going to happen. Some of you are already feeling anxious. Some of you won't feel anxious until the morning of an exam. Some of you are already sitting there going, oh man, I've got that maths homework to do. It's eating away at you now. Some of you are sitting there going, no, I'm not worried, but secretly you are. It's going to happen. So what you need to do is know the markers. When it does happen, take steps to address it. That way, what happens is you bounce back, don't you? You bounce back from it. You get a bad result in an assessment. It's going to happen. At some point, life's going to take over and it's going to impact on the score you get in a test and an assessment. Guess what? It doesn't matter. That 1 mark does not matter. It doesn't define you. And I'm not being a politician and telling you that. I'm telling you that from 20 years of experience in a classroom, year after year with HSC students. Seeing a kid like Nikki fail her first assessment task. Fail it. 6 out of 15 for a speech. Now doing arts law at university, Melbourne University. You can bounce back. That's the important thing to remember. But you won't if you don't eat well, exercise where you can, when you can, and understand that the knowledge that you can attain, the knowledge that you can keep, that's truly what is powerful. That's what's powerful. Because when you walk into that final exam, when you walk into that assessment task, when you have to stand up and make a speech about your related text and discovery, when you have to do these things, you have the knowledge. Think about it like this. I like this. Trampolines. We all love them, yeah? We bounce on a trampoline. Kids love bouncing on trampolines. And the thing with a trampoline is this. You can bounce. Woohoo! Stand in one spot. You can bounce. My 4-year-old does it all the time. She just bounces. Stands there. And then we started going to kindy gym. Bigger trampoline. What happened? Zoe starts bouncing. Then what happens? She goes to her knees. She falls down. Cries. It's all right. Come on, get up. Try again. Bounce. Tries on her knees again. Flat on her face. Boom. Little bit of a bloody nose. Come on, get up. You can keep doing it. She finally gets it. You can stand on a trampoline and you can bounce in the same spot. Yeah? You can then get off that trampoline. You've accomplished it. You've done it. You've bounced. You've done what's it. Or you can elect to do some tricks. You can elect to go to your knees and then go to your bum and then go back to your feet. You're going to fall down. You're not going to do it properly the first time. You might fall off the trampoline. Yeah. Right? Especially if you're silly and you don't put the safety net on. You might fall off, but the thing is this. You can get back on. You can get back on. And you can bounce again. And really, that's what resilience is. So I want to leave you with that. If we talk about this idea of balance, okay? My perspective as a teacher is this. Firstly, you need the knowledge. You need to understand that you are going to be learning stuff this year that is going to be used again and again and again. You're going to do an assessment on discovery, right? The Tempest, if that's what most of you are doing. You're going to then do another exam on discovery, maybe a mid-course. Then you're going to do your trials on it, then you're going to do your HSC on it. You're going to do an assessment on financial maths. Then you're going to do a trial paper that's going to have financial maths in it. Then you're going to do a HSC that's got financial maths in it. What you are learning is going to be repeated again and again. So, learn it well to start with. How do you learn it well? Have good relationships with your teachers. They count. Have good relationships with your parents. They count. Parents always say to me, how do I help? I can't help my child do English. If they tell you about a text and you sit there and you say, I've got no idea what you're talking about, why do you think that anybody else is going to have an idea? If you sit and you try to explain to your mum what discovery means in The Tempest, and your mum sits there and says, I don't get it, that's not her fault. You're not explaining it. Make sense? Foster good relationships with your parents, right? Because they become a sounding board. They're not meant to understand it, but they become a sounding board. And foster good relationships with your peers. You're all in the same boat. And as a group, you're all working together to try to push each other and get the best out of each other. Make sure you do something physical. Get those little brain cells jumping around. Make them excited. Eat well. Learn well. And when you do those things, you really start to understand that the HSC is doable. That where you've started from at 0 and where you end up this time next year, where you end up with all this knowledge that you've actually used. You've used it and you've achieved with it. That's when you walk away with that real sense of achievement and accomplishment. Doesn't matter what your mark is. Doesn't matter what your mark is. Trust me on that. There's always another way. It does not matter. What matters is your own sense that what you've done the best that you can by looking after yourself, by giving it your best shot. And to do that, you need the knowledge. Make sense? Good stuff. Thanks very much.